So it's no secret that our social media feeds are designed to keep us fixated with harmful effects on individual well-being. And there's also persuasive evidence that engagement-based feeds are not good for social and political health either. So far, by example, amping up moral outrage and divisiveness. But what's the alternative? How would you create a feed that's good for a democratic society? And that's a question that our guest, Jonathan Stray, has been thinking, writing, researching, and doing something about for years. Jonathan is a senior researcher at Berkeley Center for Human Compatible AI. He's come at thinking about conflict, social cohesion, and social media from just about every angle. As a journalist, I highly recommend, by the way, his Substack, Better Conflict. As a researcher, now leading a large-scale study testing multiple bridging algorithms, and as a bit of an organizer, working with the team to open source prosocial ranking algorithms. We're really lucky to talk to Jonathan today and learn about bridging algorithms, about building better feeds, and what he's learned so far and where we need to go. So welcome. Thanks for being here, Jonathan.
Thanks. This is fun. You make this sound so make me sound so serious, Julia.
Oh, and he's not serious at all. Sorry for
Uh-huh.
giving this misimpression.
Uh-huh.
So wait, Jonathan, just jump into it. For those who are not already steeped in them, what are bridging algorithms? Can you talk about that, or pro-social ranking algorithms, and also talk about why we should be interested or invested in them?
Yeah, right. So bridging algorithms are a particular idea for how we build um I'm just gonna say ranking systems, right? So that could be social media, it could be news recommenders, it could be search results, anything that selects and orders content in a way that improves social cohesion, mutual understanding, sort of basic um, properties along that line that have to do with the way we relate to each other, particularly in the context of political disagreement or political conflict. And it's not a very complicated idea. Basically, the idea is instead of showing the most popular content, whatever gets the most likes, views, etc., you try to show the things that are popular with groups who otherwise disagree with each other. So let's say there's a news event, right? So the Charlie Kirk assassination is a perfect example. There's going to be a bunch of pieces written from the left about how horrible he was and how hateful he was. There's going to be a bunch of pieces written from the right about how this means that the left all wants him dead and is willing to use political violence. And then there are going to be some pieces written which are sort of let's say even-handed. They, try to of course, give just the facts, try to give an analysis, explain why people are having strong feelings about it, generally produce a narrative which is interesting and acceptable and feels fair to both sides. And I don't mean abstractly feels fair. I mean like actually the way people respond to it are like, yeah, that's okay. So can we identify that and bring that to the top of the feed? That's the kind of idea we're talking about. So it's not a specific algorithm, it's an idea for a design for algorithms. And there's a bunch of ways that you can translate that into specific algorithms or sort of practical reality. And some of these have already been tested in production. Some of them have been tested in research that my team has done. And some of them are things that have yet to be tried.
Okay, so let's go there. So I mentioned already you're doing this large scale study. By the way, full disclosure, I'm part of that team. But so can we talk about some of the varieties of the ways those we can build those pro-social algorithms? And I guess this is a three-parter, what you've learned so far, and then I guess you have to talk a little bit about what you're doing in the study. How does it work?
Yeah, right. Okay, so concretely, how do you do this? So the first thing I want to say is this is not quite the filter bubble hypothesis. The point is not just to show people stuff from the other side. In particular, that approach has been tested and does not work particularly well. The biggest test of it was one of the Facebook studies from 2020. Um, I'm struggling to remember the name of the paper. I'm sure you have it on the in the PDN repository, Julia. But basically they increased the amount of cross-cutting content and did not see any effects at all on political attitudes or polarization. And my explanation for that is, well, it's not just content from the other side people need to see, it's content that is from the other side and is positive in some way. So the type of interaction matters. So if you start thinking about it that way, there's a bunch of different algorithms that one could think of. So one sort of generic class of algorithms we could call diverse approval or diverse engagement. So it's literally what I just said earlier, right? So pick the posts that get lots of likes from people who otherwise disagree about things. And X's community notes algorithm, which is not for ranking posts, but for ranking like context labels, like misinformation labels, works this way. And one of the algorithms we tested is just called diverse approval. And what it does is it scrapes a whole bunch of news sources, several hundred of them, and then it basically uses an LLM-based model to say, which ones of these would be things that would be considered, interesting and fair to both liberals and conservatives. In our case, we were testing sort of across the American left-right divide. In principle, this kind of thing could apply across any type of political divide. Obviously, in different countries, in different contexts, there's ethnic divides, there's religious divides, there's local and national and global divides. So that's one of the ideas, diverse approval. Another idea is, again, a fairly old idea, surprising validators. The idea is that in a conflict, there are true and important things that you are unlikely to hear because it's mostly people you disagree with who are saying them. So instead, one way to sort of get around that is show you things you would disagree with from sources that you agree with. So when your side says it, you're more likely to listen. In-group criticism is sort of easier to hear. Or conversely, show things you would agree with from sources you would disagree with. So if the other side says something that you agree with, that can also close the gap. So this examples of this in the real world are, Melania Trump saying that she's pro-choice, for example, was one of the things that this algorithm picked up. And so this is called surprising validators, or in our study, we called it challenging political stereotypes. So there's a few of the different ways that you might go about this, and there's a few more. And as Julia mentioned, and she's being modest, she was one of the originators of this project. We ran a huge contest and experiment called the Prosocial Ranking Challenge, where we asked people from all over the world to submit prototype ranking algorithms. So not just ideas, but actual code. We had a peer-reviewed jury select the best ones. Then we tested 5 of them with 10,000 people use on Facebook, Reddit, and Twitter using a custom browser extension to alter their feed between the platform and the web interface. So to actually add, remove, and reorder items. And we are, for the last 2 months, we've been a week away from having a working paper finished, but we are getting very close. And to make a very long story short, we found statistically significant but small reductions in polarization for 2 of the 5 algorithms we tested. And so we can talk a bit about what I think the implications of that are.
Great. Yeah, I think you answered all 3 parts of my 3-parters.
Mm,
Um, So, by the way, folks, we're going to be opening up to Q&A probably after the next question, depending on how long it goes. So if you have questions for Jonathan, start percolating on those or dropping them in the chat. And uh, last or second to last question to you, Jonathan. Um, so you're also working on a project which I don't really know anything about. So I'm really interested to hear your answer here, that trying to take these bridging algorithms and the different variations
hmm
and get them out there in the world, so that they can be used via open protocols like Blue Sky,
hmm
and in other ways. So tell us about that project. How's it going? And really, what do you see as the promise of getting these algorithms out into the world and adopted and used?
Yeah. So there's basically 2 ways. So, we've shown that this has interesting effects in an experimental setting. So the next question is, can we get it out as a product people can actually use. And there's basically two ways to do it. One is that the big platforms have to change their algorithms. So that's not impossible. There's a bunch of people working on that. Many of you are working on advocacy in this area. And of course, one of the points of publishing this research is to prove that it is possible. And by the way, it doesn't always reduce engagement. We found that some combinations of algorithms and platforms actually increase time on site. So it is not the case that all our platforms are currently on the Pareto frontier of good for business and good for society. So that's actually encouraging news because it says that there, in some cases, are free wins here. To the extent that the wins are not free, that's where advocacy and regulation become important. So that's one path, and I actually am reasonably optimistic about that. Another path is, well, let's just build them into alternative platforms. So the biggest alternative open platform at this time is Blue Sky or the AT protocol ecosystem. So for those of you who are not familiar with how this works, AT protocol is like email. It's an open standard. It is a sort of a global content universe that anyone can build an app that reads and writes to. Blue Sky is the main application, the sort of launch application, and the Blue Sky Foundation maintains that protocol. But there's actually a variety of apps already that run on AT Proto. And so Green Earth is infrastructure for Blue Sky. And Green Earth is open source, production grade, AI driven, pro-social recommender infrastructure. It's a mouthful, but the idea is we're building out the core algorithms that we have tested as open source infrastructure. And including not just the ability to support the bridging algorithms that we've talked about, but to be able to control your feed with an AI prompt. All right, so this is something that you can now do on Instagram. You can now do on Threads as of last week. You can send a message that says, "Dear algorithm, I want more or less of this." And so that's coming to the big platforms. And to remain competitive as alternative social media platforms, we have to match those types of features. And that is expensive and technically challenging, which is why you want a centralized project to do it. We've started with a 300K grant from Project Liberty, and we're raising funds from other places. The Europeans in particular have an interest in this. We're talking to a bunch of European organizations about collaborating and funding because they're very interested in having a sovereign platform stack. So the technology is coming. People in the ecosystem are building applications, recruiting users. There's a TikTok clone. There's an Instagram clone. It's all sort of coming there. And the beautiful thing about this ecosystem is there's sort of a feed app store, if you want to think of it that way, where you can choose what type of algorithm you want. And our modest goal is to build the infrastructure to support the best feed algorithms, best in a number of senses, both competitive with commercial platforms and high degree of user control, high degree of pro-social customization.
That's really exciting. I was not expecting so much promise and optimism, so that's really great to hear. One last question, and then we'll open it up. And this is just a question we ask pretty much everyone come here. What don't we know? Or of course, you can't answer that in full, but what do we need to? What do you think we need to be learning and asking and discovering? What's most important?
Well, we did the Prosocial Ranking Challenge ended up primarily studying polarization dynamics, and the algorithms we were testing were designed to reduce polarization, and some of them did. There's a whole bunch of other effects you might care about. So we really didn't work very much on misinformation for a variety of reasons. We didn't see effects on news knowledge. Uh, Only one of the algorithms we had designed, we tested was really designed to improve news knowledge, so it's not too surprising. We didn't necessarily test it in all of the ways that you might want to see those effects. So informativeness, misinformation, I think that's still wide open. Well-being, there's a whole bunch of stuff there. Well-being, addiction, again, we included a well-being scale. We didn't see any movement. We didn't expect to see movement on well-being and mental health scales because they are difficult to move. lots and lots of things in users' lives are affecting their well-being other than what they're seeing on social media. But there are a variety of other measures, actually mostly developed in industry, that are more sensitive to well-being changes. We didn't study addiction, we didn't study youth, and in particular, because of the constraints of an experiment like this, we don't see any network effects, right? So uh, there's already evidence that if what you're seeing is less polarized, you're going to post less polarized stuff. So that would increase the effect relative to these like individual users in the network just seeing better feeds, which is what we were able to do in the experiment. And if the whole feed is running on such an algorithm, then you're changing the incentives for producers, right? So for journalists and politicians. So there's a variety of second order effects which might be quite powerful, which we don't really understand very well yet. And the only way to understand them is to change the algorithm for all users of a platform, not just some of them, which is part of why we're doing Green Earth. It's so that we can have feeds that we as researchers can control and change it for everybody on the feed at once.
Thank you. We are going to end the recorded portion of this and turn
Mhm.
to Q&A.